Good morning. My name is Joaquin Harrell, and today our topic of conversation will be on public schools. For my Urbn 2000 class at the University of Connecticut, we were asked to do a final project on any aspect of the course through application of acquired knowledge and academic rigor. As a Puerto Rican, Black American, I think it is right that I speak on the inequalities of race in public schools in the United States. We know that not every public high school in the country is on the same playing ground. We know that depending on where you live in the country and the amount of money that is made in the household determines what kind of public school you would attend. Today we will talk about the history of why this is a problem and why this was planned to hold back people of color in this country. Using Connecticut as an example, according to the Atlantic, Connecticut is one of the wealthiest states in the Union, but thousands of children attend schools that are among the worst in the country. Higher income towns such as Greenwich, Darien, have way better schools than Bridgeport and New Britain. The students in higher income towns have easy access to guidance counselors, school psychologists, personal laptops, new textbooks. Everything is handed to them, while students in these high poverty areas tend to have students that need extra help, and nothing is done to help them because the school don't have the high class accessibility. Not only do they not obtain the necessary professionals and equipment for them to prestige, but they also have larger class sizes. Greenwich, according to the State Department of Education, spends about $6,000 more per student a year than what Bridgeport has to offer. These issues are not the school's fault, teachers' fault, or even the families. It is the government's fault because local cities and towns are funded by property taxes. High poverty areas like Bridgeport and New Britain have lower home values and collect less taxes. With less collected taxes means less money to provide for these schools. Unlike Darien and Greenwich, where homes are worth millions of dollars, the system of public schooling is unconstitutional according to attorney Joseph P. Mood, who has fought for the parents, students, teachers, unions, and other residents of Connecticut. States have taken account for educational cost sharing and only shared it to some districts more than others. Not only does this affect the district or town these schools are located in, but also the students' futures. Lower spending on public high schools can damage a child's future, making poor families more poor because their child is going to amount to nothing and end up more likely what their parents are. According to the National Bureau of Economic Research, a 20% increase in per pupil spending a year for poor children can lead to an additional year of completed education. 25% higher earnings and a 20 percentage point reduction in the incidence of poverty in adulthood. Back in the day, the type of education a child received depended on if the child was a he or a she, what color skin he or she had, where he or she lived, how much money his or her family made, and even what church he or she went to. Instead of going into every reason why kids were deprived of education, I will only focus on post-World War II when America decided to allow black families to be cast aside for white families to live a better life. White families started to move out of high-density cities and into the suburbs and started creating school systems for their own kids, leaving black kids in the dirt, stuck in the cities where poverty values plummeted and schools lacked basic resources. What this was called was redlining, when America decided to segregate its own country. After World War II, the U.S. faced a housing shortage, and the federal government started a program explicitly designed to increase and segregate its housing stock. According to Richard Rothstein, the government's efforts were primarily designed to provide housing to white, middle-class, lower-middle-class families. Blacks and other people of color were left out of the conversation of converting to a new suburban community and instead pushed into urban housing projects, aka ghettos. The FHA, Federal Housing Administration, was in charge of subsidizing builders who were mass-producing entire subdivisions for white. They were required that none of these new homes were to be sold to blacks. These acts have led blacks to lasting effect on their upbringing. The segregation of our cities had led to stagnant inequality because families are much less able to be upwardly mobile when they are living in neighborhoods where opportunity is non-existent. The term redlining came from the federal government indicating where it was safe and not safe to insure mortgages. There were color codes designed to show anywhere where blacks lived or where they lived nearby, were colored red indicating to appraisers that these neighborhoods were too risky to insure mortgages. This was implemented in America's system in the 1940s, 50s, and even into the 60s, expressing that blacks did not gain any of the equity appreciation that whites gained for over 20 years. This isn't a small setback because for over 2 decades, blacks were out of a chance of selling those same homes today for 300 or 400,000 at the minimum. That is 8 times the national median income, another way America has yet again set blacks back. It wasn't until 1968 is when the Fair Housing Act was in effect, allowing blacks to finally buy houses in the suburbs, but it was already too late. It was an empty promise because those homes were already no longer affordable to blacks and left whites to continue gaining equity and wealth that followed. In the present day, those homes were allowed white families to easily put their children through college with their home equities. They were able to take care of their parents in old age and not depend on their children. They were easily able to give their children a fortune, but for blacks, not so much. To tie up this podcast, we can now agree that public schools have inequalities within their funding, policy, and segregation as maintaining inequality of opportunity because of America's racist past. The FHS of the U.S. government creating color codes in the past had led to little to no public funds for many of these inner city schools. Due to old policies, America caters to those public high schools in the suburbs as they are funding with ease, while the dense inner cities have schools that are dwindling with drastically low graduation rates. This has led to many lawsuits because it is clear how the school system is segregated and not giving our future students of color an equal opportunity to learn and grow like the white kid in the suburbs.